The first letter left her hands on a Thursday, just after the rain stopped. Elina walked down the gravel path to the old village postbox, her boots soft against the earth still damp with storm water. Her hands shook slightly as she sealed the envelope. Pale blue, lined with tiny gold flowers. She had chosen that design on purpose. He once told her that when he was deployed, all color drained from the world. So she tried to send some back. She had written 5 pages. Carefully, honestly, not desperate, but real. She told him about the broken faucet, the neighbor's goat that wouldn't stop screaming, how the wind now howled at night like a warning she couldn't shake. She ended the letter with 3 words, "Come back soon." But she didn't know then, that was the first of 52, one every week for a year. His name was Kweku, strong, broad, not a man of many words. He'd grown up in the dry north and joined the military at 19. By 28, he was a legend in quiet circles, steady, disciplined, always the first to walk into danger and the last to leave. When they married, it wasn't in a big ceremony. Just 10 people, 1 borrowed suit, and Elina in a simple white dress her aunt had stitched. But the way he looked at her, like she was air and light and fire, made it feel grander than any hall could hold. Then came the deployment. It wasn't the first, but it was the farthest. A remote zone, border country. Tension simmered like a covered pot, and letters were the only thing allowed in. No calls, no emails, just paper and hope. So she wrote. Week after week, she lit candles and sat in their tiny kitchen with ink-stained fingers, pouring her heartbeat into lined pages. She told him everything, not just events, but feelings. The ache of his absence. The way the house sighed differently without him. The way her hands reached across the bed at night and found only linen. And every week, she walked to the postbox, sometimes barefoot, sometimes through heat that made the air shimmer. She never missed a single week. The villagers started noticing. Still no letter back? The shopkeeper would ask gently, slipping her an extra orange. She'd smile politely and say, "Maybe next week." Always, maybe. Never no. But weeks turned into months. And still, nothing came, no replies. No handwriting in his firm, square script. Not even a scribbled note from command. Just silence. Elina didn't stop writing. She didn't write to be answered. She wrote to remember. The memories of him lived in those pages. The way he ran a hand through his hair when thinking. The way he hated mornings but loved watching her wake up. The way he danced awkwardly, only when no one was looking, to the same high life tape over and over. One letter. She folded a dried flower into it, another. She tucked in a small drawing she'd made. Of their house? The one with the crooked window and stubborn door once. She wrote a single sentence on white paper and mailed it anyway. If you're alive, I love you. She knew war took things slowly. First time. Then sleep. Then sound. Then names, but she refused to let it take her voice. On the 52nd week, she lit her last candle. The paper felt heavier that night, like it knew it would be the final one. She didn't write much. Just told him how quiet the world had become. How sometimes she spoke to herself just to hear a voice in the room. How she didn't want answers anymore. Just to believe he could feel her words wherever he was. She signed it differently. Not yours always. Not love. Elina. Just still writing. She walked barefoot to the postbox that night. The sky was clear, the moon full, the road silent. When the envelope slipped through the metal slit, something inside her did too, a small surrender. Soft and slow. She turned and walked home. 2 days later, the knock came. It wasn't dramatic. Just 2 short knocks on a warm morning. When she opened the door, she knew there were no words, only the uniform, the bowed head, the envelope, not blue this time, white, official, stamped. We regret to inform you. She didn't cry right away. She didn't scream. She just stood still. The air pulled out of her lungs, as if grief had knocked the breath out before even introducing itself. He was gone. Gone just days before his return was scheduled. The unit had been ambushed. Details classified. Body recovered. They said he was brave. They always say that. They said he died saving. Others. She already knew that. They said he died. Instantly, she didn't believe them. The funeral was small, just like the wedding 10 chairs. A wooden box. No open casket. Too much damage. Elina sat with both hands in her lap, a pale blue envelope clutched in her fingers. The last one. She hadn't mailed it. She had saved it. For this. When it came time to walk up, she rose, slow and composed. No sobs, no wails. Just a trembling breath. She placed the envelope on top of the coffin, gently, like placing a baby in its crib, and whispered nothing. There was nothing left to say. She turned and walked away before the box lowered. But just as she reached the tree line, someone called her name. She turned. It was a soldier, young, dark-skinned, eyes red with fatigue, one hand in a sling. He walked up, pressing something into her hands. A notebook, worn, dirt-smudged, edges curled. The spine cracked from overuse. She looked at him, confused. He read every letter, the soldier said softly. Every single one. Then he walked away. She stood there, alone under the trees, notebook pressed to her chest like a secret. And only then, did the tears come. Not loud. Not messy, but long and deep, the kind of crying that doesn't ask for comfort, just release. Elina didn't open the notebook right away. She sat in her small living room for hours, hands resting on its weathered cover like it was a heartbeat she wasn't ready to listen to. The soldier had said he read every letter, and left it at that. No explanation, no comfort, just the notebook, warm from his hands, stained with travel and time. The candle on her table had long burned out, but she stayed seated, still, motionless, as if cracking that cover would unlock a door she had kept bolted shut, a door she had built with grief, denial, and the sharp edges of unanswered letters. When she finally opened it, it smelled like iron and ash. Dirt clung to the inner spine. The pages were curled in places, damp in others. She turned the first one and gasped softly. Not from what she saw, but from the handwriting, his neat, firm, familiar. It was the kind of handwriting she knew by heart, from birthday notes, scribbled grocery lists, little labels he'd left on boxes when they moved into their first rented home. But here on the opening page, it was raw, less tidy, like it had been written with urgency. Her name was at the top. Just one word. Elina. Under it, a date. It matched the date of her very first letter. I got it today. The blue envelope. I read it twice before lights out. I wanted to sleep with it under my pillow, but that would have made me soft in front of the boys. I can still smell your perfume on the paper. Or maybe I'm imagining it. Either way, it helped me breathe better. Her hands trembled. She flipped to the next page. A new entry. 1 week later, another date, matching her second letter. You wrote about the goat again. You said it's screaming louder now. I laughed out loud and the others looked at me. I didn't care. I needed that laugh. I needed to hear your voice in my head. Every page after that was a response, a private echo of the letters she had sent into silence. Had read them all. Every single one. And he had written back, not in return letters, not in emails, but in this hidden notebook, like a man documenting a love he was too afraid to share out loud in a place built for death. Elina flipped faster now. Each page carried pieces of him, his memories, his regrets, his deep, unspoken longing. The desert here is quiet in a violent way. At night it hums, not like music, like warning. I hold your letter close when it gets too loud. I trace your handwriting with my finger and pretend your skin is near. They don't let us send out much. It's all monitored. But I want you to know that I think about the color of our kitchen. How you always said yellow made it look too proud. I think about that stupid cracked tile by the fridge. I'd give anything to step on it again. Someone died today. A good man. I watched his blood run into the sand and I wanted to scream. But all I did was write. You keep me human, Elina. You keep me soft in a world that eats softness alive. She stopped reading. Tears blurred the ink. The room swayed. She clutched the notebook to her chest and wept, but not like before. Not from absence. This was a different grief. A grief born from the knowing that he had never left her emotionally. That his silence hadn't been neglect. It had been survival. She remembered now how she used to cry herself to sleep whispering, just one reply. Just one, and he had written them every single time, but they'd never reached her because he never sent them. Days passed. She didn't tell anyone about the notebook. It became her quiet temple. She read only a few entries a day like sacred rituals. Each one pulled her deeper into the man she thought she'd lost long before death took him. And what she found there wasn't just love, it was intimacy. Brutal, aching intimacy. He had written about dreams he didn't share out loud. He had imagined children. A daughter, specifically. Said he hoped she would have Elina's sharp tongue and his patience. He wrote about fears. Not of dying, but of returning home too broken to love her well. I wonder if I'll still be the man you married. I've changed, Elina. War eats time. It eats memory. Sometimes I forget my own birthday. But I never forget your face. I trace it in the dirt when I can't sleep. Just to remember shape. Just to hold on to something real. One night, near the final pages, she found bloodstains, small ones, dried, rust-colored dots near the corners of the last 3 entries. The handwriting became more rushed, more jagged, less controlled. She knew instantly. These were his last days. They're moving us again. Higher ground. More danger. I don't know how much longer I'll have this notebook. If I die and they find this, I hope they give it to you. I hope you know I was yours until the end. The final entry wasn't a letter. It was a drawing, a simple sketch of their house. Crooked window. Stubborn door. The kitchen window was open, and inside it, a woman stood with her head tilted up toward the sun. It wasn't perfect, but she knew it was her. Beneath the sketch, he had written one final sentence. You kept me alive longer than you'll ever know. That night, Elina didn't sleep. She lay on the bed with the notebook beside her, fingers tracing the cover over and over like a rosary. She thought about how many letters she had sent, thinking they vanished into the void. How many times she thought her love was unanswered, and yet, he had held every word, every sentence, like oxygen. The next morning, she walked out to the postbox, not to send a letter, but to sit beside it, to say goodbye to the silence. She didn't cry this time. She just sat and breathed and remembered, and for the first time in a year, she felt answered. It began to rain 3 days after she finished the notebook. Not the kind of rain that crashes against the windows with rage, but the kind that falls slowly, like tears too tired to fight. Elina stood by the kitchen window, the one he had drawn in his final sketch, watching droplets slide down the glass like they were trying to find their way home. The house was quiet, too quiet. There was no new letter to write, no envelope to seal, no trip to the postbox. For the first time in a year, her routine, once filled with ritual and hope, had nowhere to go. The silence felt heavier than ever, not because it meant emptiness, but because it was now filled with everything. She knew too late she kept the notebook on the bedside table, not tucked away, not hidden open. As if his words still breathed through the pages, as if his hand would return to finish that final drawing, maybe sketch the curtains she used to forget to close, or the flower pot that never held anything but dry soil. She had memorized his entries, each line etched into her heart like scripture. But the one that haunted her most wasn't the poetic ones. Not the lines about tracing her handwriting in dirt, or dreaming of children, or hearing her laugh in his dreams. It was the smallest one. Almost buried, just 10 words. Scrawled at the bottom of an entry written during a dust storm. I hope my silence didn't teach you how to forget. She hadn't forgotten. She had loved him with every word she wrote. Every step to the post box, every night she cried into his side of the bed. But now she realized something. She had also grown angry, not loudly, not publicly, but in those final weeks, before the funeral, before the soldier, before the notebook. She had begun to resent him, his silence, his distance, his absence. She never stopped writing, but the softness had faded. There were letters she'd sent that were colder, shorter, bitten at the edges. Not cruel, but hurt. She had written lines like, "Maybe you've forgotten me," or, "I guess the war has your attention now." She remembered those letters now with shame burning through her ribs. And yet, he never stopped writing back. Every time she withdrew, his entries stayed the same. Gentle, patient, even more vulnerable. As if he knew what her anger truly was. Grief with no place to go. That night, she dreamed of him, not as a ghost, not in uniform, but as he had been once, standing in the kitchen in a worn t-shirt, stirring tea slowly, humming under his breath. She stood beside him, invisible, watching his every move. He turned toward her, smiling, and said nothing. Just looked, and in the dream, she understood. He didn't write those letters to be read. He wrote them so she'd know she was never forgotten, even if the world never let his words reach her. She woke up, sobbing, not from the dream, but from the truth. The war hadn't taken him all at once. It had taken him piece by piece, and he had given what was left to her. In that notebook. In every line he wrote instead of sleeping. In every entry penned after watching someone else die. In every sentence that smelled of dirt and longing and exhaustion. And she had walked around for a year thinking she was alone. But she wasn't. She was just unaware of how deeply she was held, quietly, faithfully, painfully, by a man who didn't have the luxury of saying, "I love you," out loud. Weeks passed. She didn't return to the post box. Instead, she began something else. Every morning, she'd light a single candle and sit at the old desk in their bedroom. She would open a fresh notebook, not to replace his, but to respond. She wrote him letters again, but this time she wrote back. "I read your words today. I smelled your grief. I felt your fatigue. I wish I could have held you through every line you didn't send. You never stopped loving me. I know that now. You just didn't know how to let love live in a place built to kill. I'm sorry I ever doubted your silence." The notebook filled quickly. Not with guilt, but with grace. Each page was her forgiveness. Each sentence her tribute. She didn't write for closure. She wrote for continuity. A way to keep their bond alive, not in memory, but in motion. She spoke to him like he could still hear. She laughed on the page. She confessed again. She remembered small things, like the way he chewed mangoes with too much noise, or how he always folded laundry in perfect squares. And one day, she wrote the words she had never said in real life. "You saved me, not from death, but from believing that silence meant nothing." The village never asked her about him. Again, they assumed she had moved on, that she had buried him, fully, that she had left her grief with the coffin. But they didn't know what she carried. They didn't see the notebook in her bag, the candle she lit every morning, the way her eyes sometimes drifted upward when the wind moved through the trees, as if she was listening for something unsaid. Then one day, it arrived. A package. No sender. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Him not. In uniform. Not during war, but in a frame she had never seen. Standing in front of their house, smiling, holding up the first letter she ever sent. Behind him, another soldier, the same one who'd given her the notebook, barely visible, holding the camera. On the back of the photo, written in his clean handwriting, "Tell her I kept this with me. Always." Elina wept, not loudly, just enough to know the grief was still alive. But softer now, like something that no longer stabbed, only stirred. She framed the photo, placed it beside the notebook, and lit one more candle. Not for mourning, but for memory. Autumn arrived without warning. The leaves in the hills behind the village turned the color of ash and fire. The air thinned. The skies dulled to a softer blue. It was the season they had planned to repaint the house. Kweku once said, "That's when light hits the walls just right." Now, Elina stood outside with a brush in her hand. Not to change the color, but to preserve it. She no longer waited for him, but she hadn't let him go either. She had learned that letting go was a myth. You don't release someone you built your soul with. You simply learn how to carry them differently. He lived now in the morning rituals, the candle, the notebook, the slow, steady breath before she placed pen to page and wrote him letters no one would ever read. There were hundreds now, each one signed with soft endings. Still listening, still writing, still yours. Some days she wrote full pages. Other days only a sentence. Once she wrote just a name, the name they had picked for the daughter they never had. Amma. The village thought she had moved on. She dressed well. She smiled more. She walked upright, barefoot in the grass again, humming softly under her breath. A few quiet men tried to ask about dinner or coffee. She never said no cruelly, just with a kind, unmovable silence, because she belonged to someone whose body had left, but whose presence had never really gone. Every month, she visited the post box, not to send anything, but to sit, to remember how it all began, the first walk, the first envelope, the first hope. She didn't cry there anymore. She just rested her palm on the metal door and whispered thank you, because the postbox had carried her love through war. And now, it carried her memory through life. One morning, the soldier returned, the one who had handed her the notebook. He was older now, thinner. He had a scar down his neck and a limp in his left leg. She made him tea without asking. He didn't stay long, but he left something in her hand before leaving. A USB stick. She turned it over, unsure. Later that night, she plugged it into her old laptop. Inside were 3 files, no names, just dates. She opened the first. It was a video Kweku in uniform, covered in dust, laughing. The camera shook slightly, but the image was clear. Him sitting on a crate, holding one of her letters. The blue envelope still intact. He read from it, not out loud, just to himself. Then looked at the camera and smiled. A tired, weathered smile, but real. He didn't speak. He just held up the letter and placed it gently against his chest. The screen went black. The second video showed him sketching something in the dirt. The house. Then her name. He circled it once, then tapped it with his finger, like a signature. The third and final file was just a photo slideshow, pictures of the desert, their camp, his bunk, and one photo, blurry, taken at night, of him sitting under a makeshift lamp, writing, the notebook in his lap, her letter beside it. Elina watched it all without blinking. It wasn't closure, it was continuation. A new page, a new way to remember him. Not as a uniform, not as a coffin, not even as a notebook, but as a man who chose her every day in a place where nothing lasted. That night, she lit 3 candles, one for memory, one for gratitude, one for everything unsaid. She placed the USB beside the notebook, and beside them both, a new page. She wrote one final letter in that series. Not a goodbye, not a question, just this. I know now. You never stopped writing, neither will I. She didn't sign it. Some things don't need a name. Epilogue. Years later, her house became known as the one with letters. The mailbox was never full, but flowers appeared there, notes, from widows, from wives, from strangers, from other soldiers who came through town on quiet trips. She never asked who left them. She just read them and kept them, like her own had once been kept. She built a shelf in the back room, filled it with notebooks, dozens of them, All written by hand, all in her clean, careful script. Some addressed to Kweku, others to no one, but all of them meant, all of them mattered. When she died, decades later, they found the shelf, each notebook labeled only by date. Not one was empty. The postbox still stood, old, rusted, slightly leaning to one side. But when the wind moved just right, you could almost hear it whispering. He read every letter,